We are so addicted to patterns that we let them seep into almost everything we do. And these patterns are the key to predicting many aspects of our behaviour, even the darkest parts of our nature.
Deceased, female, like 5'2", complexion dark, eyes brown, hair brown. When you see this much activity in such a small geographic area, in such a tight time frame, that's a warning bell that something is going on, that we have a predator operating.
Kim Rosmo has 20 years' experience as a detective inspector. He specialises in hunting down serial killers.
The victim's body was found here in the corner by a police officer that came in shortly after the crime had occurred.
But Rosmo is no ordinary cop, because he's got a PhD and uses mathematics to understand the patterns criminals leave behind.
There's a logic in how the offender hunted for the victim and the location where he committed the crime. If we can decode that, and if we can understand that pattern, we can use that information to help us focus a criminal investigation.
The reason it's so hard to catch serial killers is because there's often no link to their crimes. They kill random strangers in locations they have no obvious connection to.
It's very common in the investigation of a serial murder case to have hundreds, thousands, even tens of thousands of suspects. It's a needle in a haystack problem. Where do you start?
In 1888, the most notorious serial killer of all, Jack the Ripper, killed 5 women in London's East End. Since then, countless people have tried to solve the mystery of the Ripper's identity. But Rosmo thinks he could have tracked him down without seeing a scrap of evidence. Because he's worked out where Jack the Ripper most likely lived, based only on the location of the crimes.
Flower and Dean Street should have been the epicenter of their search.
And all he used to do it is an equation.
Inherently, we're all lazy, and criminals just as much as anyone else. They want to accomplish their goals closer to home rather than further away because it involves too much effort, too much time, too much travel.
The first half of Rosmo's equation models what's known as the least effort principle. It means that the crime locations are statistically more likely the nearer they are to where the offender lives.
If you have a choice of going to the corner store for a loaf of bread or going to one that's 7 miles down the road, you're going to pick the corner store.
It seems a bit gruesome to apply the same thing to a serial killer as going and buying a loaf of bread or milk.
Well, actually, if we can get over the horrible nature of these crimes and recognize that these are human beings like the rest of us, we can, because we understand ourselves, maybe get some understanding of these individuals.
The second half of the equation describes something called the buffer zone. Criminals avoid committing crimes too close to home for fear of drawing attention to themselves. It's the interaction of these two behaviours that allows Rosmo to calculate the most probable location of the criminal.
These individuals have to not only obtain their target or capture a victim, but avoid apprehension by the police and identification by witnesses.
The technique, known as geographic profiling, is now used by police all over the world.
Police are examining the possibility that all explosion near a branch of Barclays Bank in West London was the work of an extortionist.
Police believe the extortion demand came from the blackmailer known as Mardi Gras.
In the late 90s, Rosmo was called in by Scotland Yard to help catch the notorious Mardi Gras bomber, who for 3 years waged a campaign of terror against banks and supermarkets.
A 17-year-old man is recovering in hospital after being injured in an explosion at a Sainsbury's store in South London.
Police are advising the public to be vigilant. In truth, they can only wait to see what Mardi Gras does next.
How many bombs did he let off during that time?
Total, 36 known linked offences. So as you can see, they range from north of Cambridge all the way down to the Strait of Dover, but
Right.
most of them are in Greater London.
So this is a map showing the locations of all the bombs that were set off.
That's right.
It's certainly a concentration on London, but it looks pretty randomly scattered. So now you're feeding those locations into the equation.
Right, and what we have here now is the geoprofile, and that's going to show us the most likely location where the offender lived, with dark orange being the most likely or the most probable. So we can see that the major focus is around the Chiswick area. And in fact, in the report we prepared for Scotland Yard, we even prioritized postcodes for them.
And how successful was it in this case?
Well, let me show you the locations of the two brothers, Edgar and Ronald Pierce.
Right.
Well,
But this is really in the hot zone, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Edgar's home is in the top 0.8% of the area of the crimes in Greater London, so less than 1%.
That's extraordinary.
Edgar Pierce had demanded £10,000 a day from Barclays. And when he and his brother tried to collect it from a cash point in Chiswick, the police were waiting.
Two brothers in their 60s have been remanded in custody by magistrates in connection with the so-called Mardi Gras bombings.
Ronald and Edgar Pierce, both from Chiswick in West London, each faced 3 conspiracy charges.
It was recognized.
Based on the apparently random location of 36 bombs, Rosmer's geographic profile narrowed the location of the Mardi Gras bomber from 300 square miles to a postcode in Chiswick. Although his brother Ronald was acquitted, Edgar Pierce pleaded guilty and was jailed for 21 years.
So do you think the bomber was aware that he was creating these patterns?
No, he wasn't. But it's very difficult for humans to engage in completely random behavior.
Very few of us are aware of the patterns we leave behind.